Coffee Pot Conversations.
Bonjour and bienvenue to Coffee Pot Conversations. For those of you that don't know what's going on, this is not my regular style of episode, which is why today is a special day. Today I have a video interview remote podcast. I'm in London, he's in America, 5 hours between us. He's an amazing chap, which we're going to learn about, so I don't need to fluff him up at this section. There are show notes for you, and for those of you that don't know what I do, I pretty much do a podcast. Sort of giving the everyday Joe or tous les jours Jacques kind of view of Paris. Bits of pieces of historicity and regular culture. I'm on a low budget and I do this out of the goodness of my own heart. But I love it. Okay, we ready?
Coffee Pot Conversations.
Well, hello, and who are you?
My name is Pres Maxson. I am a writer and a musician, and I have a couple books about Paris. My most recent one is called Chinatown Troubadour, and I'm excited to chat with you about that. But we met through the Earful Tower, which is the podcast we are both fans of and the one that I make music for.
And how did you get involved with that one?
Yeah, Oliver, I was a listener, I was a fan, and Oliver and I communicated a little bit through social media. Oliver G is the host and the reason why Earful Tower is so popular. And so we'd communicated a little bit through social media. He saw one or two videos, little music videos I'd made. And I got an email from him out of the blue one day asking if I would kind of in a pinch make 40 seconds of music for him. And he offered to pay me for it and just kind of said, hey, I know you're a musician. And his wife, Lena, her father, had been making music until then, but he was unavailable for that episode or something. So I kind of saw that as an opportunity to jump on. And I was such a fan of the podcast. I still am. So I leapt on it. And a few hours later, I sent him the track back and he called me. And that was a crazy moment, hearing that podcast voice, call my cell phone. And he called and kind of right there, he said, do you want to be my guy? Do you want to, make the music for Earful Tower? So that was over 3 years ago. And I have provided the music for almost every episode since. And it's been a really fun ride.
Before I talk about the album, how do you get the inspiration for what you do for the episodes? Or is it just, I don't say generic French music, but is it sort of a style of a theme that you aim for?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think there's some creative process behind it that I'm really proud of. And just as a general note, I feel like part of the fun of being a professional creative is finding purpose behind everything you create. So in the case of Earful Tower music, it depends. It depends if the episode is about something specific or about an area in Paris. Maybe the inspiration behind making that week's music is a musician who's from that area, or maybe it's recreating a song that mentions something about, what Oliver's talking about. So an easy example would be the Eiffel Tower. I mean, he doesn't do a lot of episodes about the Eiffel Tower, but there have been some. Well, there's 1,000 songs about the Eiffel Tower. So finding one that is easy to remake and kind of makes me feel like I can put my own spin on it, that becomes the creative challenge for that week. In other times, and it helps, I'll note that it helps that I'm a pretty big fan of like 40s through 60s era French pop artists like Charles Trenet, Charles Aznavour, Edith Piaf, Yves Montand, Jacques Brel. So remaking those songs with my own little spin on them, songs by those artists, is sort of what initially attracted me to the project. But then it's worth noting that there are other times when I'll kind of hear something in my head and I'll go looking for a song that can make that come alive. And sometimes you just don't find it. So I'll write it myself, and I'll use some little inspiration from the episode to kind of help me find a melody and help me find a little chord structure. And at that point, it's just about putting it down, recording it, and I have some fun asking myself, okay, where's the accordion part in here? Where's the piano part? Where's the guitar part in here? And every week is different. And I don't make brand new music every single week. I mean, but especially when we're in the sprint of a season, I do, and that's really fun.
So I'm going to mention about all the instruments you do play, but how much time would he normally give you? Is it like quick test? I need something on the go, or do you get to hear the episodes before us mere
Yeah.
mortals do? Or
I don't usually get to hear the episodes because like Oliver's turnaround time is fast. I mean,
yeah,
he'll record something week of. Sometimes he'll record it 2 days, one day before it goes out live, and or he'll record a lot ahead of time, but then they won't edit it till the last minute. So I think the best example there is if he has an idea for a season. So a good example is the recent Earful Everywhere season, which is based in Italy, and he had this idea. Let's take the family kind of on the road and test. Is it all about Paris, or is part of the charm the fact that it's Lena and he and their children seeing something new? So that season, and this is true of the alphabet season we did and the arrondissement countdown season, where he sent me an email, we chatted a few times live, and he just said, here's my basic idea. It's going to be 10 episodes, us in Italy. We're going to visit, the Pantheon on one episode. We're going to visit the Colosseum. We're going to visit, you know, um, he kind of gave me a little roadmap ahead of time. And he said, this is subject to change, but let's just start talking about stuff. And he had a few favorite Italian songs, and we created a Spotify playlist that just was private between him and me. And he said, what about this song? What about this song? What about this song? As we went, I kind of said, hey, you can't make, in my mind, you can't make a song about, or you can't make a season about Italy without like X song, Y song, Z song. Like I kind of threw some in there also. And then at that point, he gives me a lot of freedom. I mean, once we had the ideas kind of fleshed out, I would just, kind of wake up that week. And sometimes I did two at a time. Sometimes one took me 2 weeks. I just kind of went at my own pace. But I'd say, oh, what works for blank? Or what am I most excited about now? And so he gives me a lot of freedom, and I'm very grateful for that. But it really is a collaborative effort, sort of in the end. And there's no one formula. It's just, as we go, how we're feeling, and that's a really awesome creative partnership to be a part of.
before we move away and talk about your latest book, let me ask about the 20 Arrondissement album that you did, which
Yeah,
is
yeah.
sort of that's what brought me to you.
Oh, cool.
Well, literally and obviously orally, but
Oh, thank you. No, that was, I mean, so that was the first season that I had joined Oliver and the podcast, and we were so proud of it. I mean, we had really kind of buckled down, and we were paying a lot of attention to the music in each episode. He was so great about making me sort of a character on the podcast, where every week I'd send him a little paragraph of, hey, these were the creative decisions I made behind the music, and he read those out, and he was so gracious to share the Earful Tower audience with me. And at the end of it, we were really proud of all the music we'd made and all the creative ideas that went into that. So it was really Oliver's idea. He said, let's make a record out of this. And so I took all the episodes, the 20 episodes, and we had more music than would actually fit on an album. So I spent a couple weeks just revisiting each track and saying, is there something in here? Each track was over 6 minutes long. And so I thought, okay, let's keep the best 3 or 4 minutes. I don't need to do endless solos here. We were making them over 6 minutes so that they would fit a video format that we were doing on YouTube. So I kind of just made some musical creative decisions to make them more digestible, cut them down a little bit. And then, so I did that, and each episode or each song was dedicated to one neighborhood, one district in Paris. And once we had that, Oliver, I mean, we used sort of all the creative powers of Earful Tower. I wrote the liner notes. Augusta, provided photography for it. And then Eddie, Oliver's brother, is a really talented graphic designer, and he created, I mean, he put it all together, to make album artwork and the inside liner notes. And because, I'm not going to say this too loudly, but because we didn't go after any permission, we didn't go after any permission to recreate these songs that were copyrighted by so many talented artists. We thought, okay, we're going to cite, of course, all the songwriters and all the original artists in the liner notes, but then we're not going to sell it. I mean, we're not going to make any money off this. In fact, we lost a solid amount of money on that record, but we printed just 1,000 of them, and as a gift, as a thank you, mailed them to our most engaged, the 1,000 most engaged listeners, basically. And so that's what we did. And then, sort of as an addendum, about a year or two later, I realized I had written enough original material that we did own the rights to, that had been played on the podcast enough, that we released a second album digitally only, and that's called Earful de la Musique, and it's all original music we'd made for the podcast, as sort of a part two to that original project, but for more general public consumption. And so that's out there also. So very proud of both of those albums, and it represents a really a time where I worked really hard creatively, burned a lot of midnight oil and a lot of early mornings. But I remember being at the Earful Tower Christmas party that specific year and just thinking, like, man, we did it. This is what hard work looks like paying off. And that was a meaningful time for sure.
As I say, we ended up meeting because,
Yeah.
all right, I'm now going to leave the Eiffel Tower behind, and we're going to start talking about. I've got a master's in creative writing, so I like this aspect. We're going to move towards your authorship, and I was meant to go over to Paris at one point and pick up the CD, unable to get the time frames right. So
Right.
I was left without the CD. You beautifully, gallantly volunteered to meet up with me during your trip to London, which I'm now going to refer to as Chapter 5. Because as I was reading your latest book, which we are going to talk about, I thought, I was there. I was a part of that. Oh, I wasn't mentioned, but I was definitely in that pub with you and Derek, and for me, that's when I was really starstruck. I've met Oliver. I won the auction for his Walking Canes painting.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, that was me. Yeah, he kept that quiet.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, so I've got that at home, and yeah, I met up with him, and I thought I was going to be starstruck, and I wasn't. It's like, yeah, he is such a lovely fella, down to earth.
Yeah.
But you kind of get that with all Australians. Whereas yourself, I was, because knowing what you've done and what you can do is like, wow. So just being able to talk to you now, more relaxed. I'm glad we had the mishaps prior to this. So let's talk wider than just Chapter 5. Let's talk about, because I'm honestly, I am a fanboy, and I've done a little bit of digging and a little bit of reading. So let's talk about Chinatown Troubadour.
Yeah. So first of all, that visit to London was super fun. I was in New York last week, and just two funny anecdotes about it. Derek, I wasn't in New York with Derek, but Derek and I decided to come to London on a trip to New York together. And when I was in New York, I saw some other London friends that I met up with after I met up with you, and they gave me a lot of crap for not mentioning them by name in Chapter 5. Like, they were like, man, we were there too. Like, what's going on there? Like, it's unfair. Derek got all that name drop. So you're not alone, man. And I apologize for that now. I see the error of my ways. It's also funny, when I was walking through Tribeca in New York last week, and I saw a cane on the ground. I wasn't sure if it was a cane or a mangled end of an antique umbrella, but immediately thought of Oliver's campaign or his like quest to discover canes and the
Yeah.
painting that you have. So anyone listening who doesn't know what we're talking about, it is 1,000% worth looking up the Earful Tower's like cane journey from like a year or two ago. It's really entertaining. Anyway, I thought of that recently. Um, so yeah, my latest book, Chinatown Troubadour. I mean, in a nutshell, it's the first nonfiction I've ever written. I do write a Substack account that kind of what has been my testing ground for sort of finding a style and a voice for nonfiction writing that I really liked. I had shied away from nonfiction in the past because I just didn't think I was being that interesting. You know, I didn't think I thought, why would someone care about something that's happened to me? And I used Substack to try and quiet that voice in my head and kind of solve that for me. Um, but yeah, it's my fifth book. I think it's my fifth or sixth if you count the play. And I'm really proud of all of them. But I essentially Chinatown is about. Uh, I went out and I kind of set myself on this quest to find somebody that I had met legitimately 30 years ago that I really had no business finding. I mean, I didn't know his real name. I didn't know where he lived. I didn't know sort of what had become of him, but he was a musician that I'd met on the streets in Paris, like for 10 minutes, you know, but he had left his impression and left a mark. And I always kind of thought it would be so cool to find him and find out what he was doing. And sort of spoiler alert, that's what the book is about trying to find him. Spoiler alert, I do find him and we became friends. But I can successfully say that what I found on the other end of that journey, I was not expecting to find. So yeah, it's a short book. It's hopefully pretty digestible, but also I hope it's interesting. And it just came out like what 3 months ago now, 2 months ago now.
Well, I can legitimately say it is a very good read. It was very interesting. I read it. I'm going to be. It was two sittings because the first one it was late at night, and then I woke up. I steamrolled straight through it. And
Oh, that's awesome.
yeah, no, honestly, it was edge of the seat stuff. So, oh, and there's a lot of ups and downs, emotion. We learn bits about you, um,
Yeah.
which is nice. Um, and it was from that book that I wrote down. Let me start here. So it was apart from bluegrass and old time, which is styles of music, I wrote down guitar, banjo, accordion, piano, mandolin, and trumpet. Because obviously you're a musician, I thought I'll just jot those down. And that was the order that you've mentioned them in because I'm anal like that. Um, but we have spoken about that on the recording that didn't work. But can I ask how you got involved with, I'm going to say France and Paris, because you do mention your Aunt Carol,
Yeah.
your Uncle Craig, and if
Hmm.
you could give a little bit of,
Yeah. I think for both my sister and me, uh, France and Paris was always sort of lingering in the background because my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, was a French professor at a college, Northern Illinois University near where we grew up. Then my uncle Craig married Aunt Carol, and she was also a French professor and fluent in French. And so I think at a pretty early age, certainly before it was offered in schools, my mom put Liz and me in a French class. I mean, sometime in elementary school. That's more normal now in America than it was when I was growing up. It was just kind of an after school program, you know, but it definitely gave me a leg up. By the time they were teaching foreign languages in schools, I didn't have any problem keeping up with French. And I'm not fluent by any means, but I sort of always sailed through. And then because of that early start, and then once I got to college, I tested out of any foreign language requirement when I got to college. But then once I burned through all the credits I needed for my major, which was English, I loved writing, and I saw a tie in my creative brain between writing and creating music. I kind of acknowledged early on that I felt like it was the same side of my brain that was doing the creative thinking and, churning out this artwork. Once I got all the credits out of the way in college for that, even though I didn't need to, I went back and I just started taking French classes again just because I liked it. And it was around my college years when Aunt Carol and Uncle Craig retired. They're American, and they retired from their university jobs in America and bought this little college in far west northwestern France. I mean, you can see the English Channel from their property in Brittany, which is gorgeous. So I so Chinatown Troubadour is that the opening chapter is set during the summer of 1996 when Liz and I spent our summer with them and their college students. But in the years since, I'd returned to Paris on my way out to the cottage in Brittany. And then, of course, on my way back from the cottage in Brittany. So, yeah, I think Paris was sort of like always, there every few years and certainly kind of around and I loved it. That yeah, that's my history with the city and sadly Uncle Craig and Aunt Carol are gone now. And I miss them and I love them and I hope that comes through in the book. But the cottage is still in the family. I'm embarrassed to say I haven't been at all recently. I've been to Paris far more frequently than I've been out to Brittany, but hopefully I want to get back there. Would love to take the kids out there. So
Okay, so bringing it back to Paris, because it was
mhm.
the 13th happened this month with the Chinatown part, which
Yeah.
when I went and did my first Paris marathon, I actually stayed in the 13th, so I know the
Cool,
Chinatown area.
cool.
I'm not going to say very well, but yeah, it was. We walked through it once because Nev, my other half, she was going to meet me at the halfway point, so we had to walk across, and she needed to know how to get to where she was going. So at one point, that was my favourite arrondissement. It has since changed. And now this is the question that I asked when we finally in the last recording it just cut out. So I didn't get your answer. But what I'm putting you on the spot. What is your favorite arrondissement?
I mean, that is, yeah, tough question to answer, right? I don't think the 13th is probably most people's, like, I don't think most people would kind of like have the 13th in their discussion, but for their favorite, but it's definitely in the discussion for mine. That summer Liz and I stayed there. We were staying in the 14th. Um I've yeah, I and that year we spent a lot of time in the 13th mainly because of food. The college students we were around, I mean, I was only 16 and I was hanging out with all these college students and my aunt and uncle and one of our cousins, but I mean, this crowd of people we were around loved Chinese food, Japanese food, Thai food was huge, and I wasn't a connoisseur of really any of it. But as I look back, I didn't think about it at the time, but we were spending so much time in Chinatown because of food options that I think it is sort of in the discussion for one of my favorite arrondissements now, especially because it is off the beaten path a little bit. And now, of course, I have Lucky there, and he's the main fixture of Chinatown Troubadour. And experiencing the 13th with Lucky is something that I will forever be I will forever romanticize. The way he is proud of it and the way he shows it off is really kind of really cool to witness. And actually, side note, since I wrote the book, Derek, who's a primary figure in the book, he's been back to Paris and hand delivered Lucky the book. And even though Lucky and Derek had never met, they really don't speak the same language at all. Lucky still was like, I'm gonna show you the 13th, and like he took Derek all over Chinatown, and like they had like a
Oh,
day.
amazing.
Like Derek was like, I was planning on being there for 15 minutes, taking a picture, giving him the book. He's like, nah. He's like, we spent like 4 hours together, and I thought that was really funny.
So I was just going to say, was Derek sort of ripping off the posters for his next project?
Yeah, he made a couple of Paris collages after that trip, I'm pretty sure. Everywhere he goes, he creates those collages that chapter 5 is about. He's a good follow on social. He's at 2 tiers, TWO, I think underscore TEARS. He's an excellent social follow, and you get to see him make his art. But no, this is the most long-winded answer to what's your favorite arrondissement. I would say the 13th is up there for me. Like my teenage heart sort of loves like the 5th and 6th, the Latin Quarter, and like the area just east of the Eiffel Tower and the 7th. I love staying in the 2nd just because it's a little quieter and sort of like suits my grown-up heart like a little bit more. But it's impossible to pick one. I don't know. Can you pick one? That's my question for you. Can you
I,
pick one?
I can. It's almost like I'm copying your footsteps. The 14th. I absolutely love it. I've stayed there once with Nev, and we were right by Parc Moncherie, and
Yeah.
walking towards the catacombs out of it felt very I've never really been to the Med, but it felt Mediterranean. It had a very Latino
Mm,
feel about it. The
cool.
second time was during the Paris Olympics, and we were
Mm,
totally away from that style of feel, but it felt so normal, so natural. Same as with the 13th. It is off the beaten path. It's not very touristic. And to me, it sounds wrong. I go to Paris because it's Paris, but I like not being in the Paris part of Paris. Um, I think it opens up exploration for me as well. I'm seeing parts I wouldn't see, but yeah, it's for me, it's the 14th.
yeah. Oh, that's lovely. I've got so many great memories down to the 14th, and a lot of times when I guess I didn't do it in the last year or two, but I sometimes I go all the way down there to Parc Montsouris and the campus at Cité,
Yeah.
International Université de Paris, and I just like walk around and sort of reminisce about the time spent down there. I visit the bakery I got kicked out of when I was 16, just to relive all the trauma of that, you know.
Well, there's the first time I'd ventured knowingly beyond the Périphérique, I ended up in just by Montrouge, and there was a
Mm.
patisserie kind of place, like a boulangerie, but it was Portuguese. And I
Oh,
spent a few
interesting.
mornings in there while never sleeping, um, just
Yeah,
eating and writing. And yeah, there is something. I'm walking through university gardens as well. Beautiful. You've got your
yeah,
big parks,
yeah,
your big gardens, but again, something that isn't on the tourist hit list. For me, that's the magic of Paris. It's
yeah.
something for
I
everyone,
agree.
should we say.
Yep.
So, more books, because it's not
Hmm.
just the non-fiction, it's the fiction. Written on two post-it notes, and apologies for this. I'm going to start with William Lord Bensington Kent and Thakkel Wackerton, Jacques Pistache, Trudeau van Hugelstein, and then we have the Paris Public Cricket Pitch, Grounds, Garden, Grass Court and Lawn Club. How on earth do you come up with these names and organisations, jobs as well? It's what what is your, I don't say creative process, but what what do you take to get
Yeah.
those names?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I don't take a lot, to be honest. I don't know where those come from. I mean, I think I'm thinking back to so a those are everything you just named is sort of a swath of characters and creative ideas across um my three like main pieces of fiction. My first book, Bender the Bon Parisian, then Pigeon, and then Bastards of the Revolution. And I got the idea for each of those books while I was writing the previous one. So like while I was working through my very first one, Bender at the Bon Parisian, I had the idea for Pigeon, and it was one of those things where even though I was still in the process of Bender, I got really excited about the idea for Pigeon, and then while I was writing Pigeon, I got really excited about the idea for Bastards, and I have them upstairs still, but I'll sit at my writing desk or or somewhere, and I'll like tear off a Post-it note, and I'll think like, um, uh, in fact, one that never came to fruition upstairs, I have it on a Post-it note, is I don't know where it comes from, but like I just had this idea to write about a sleeping bag factory, like the factory that makes the bag in which you put a sleeping bag, and like so. Like I've never been able to work it in somewhere, but I have this post-it upstairs that says "Sleeping Bag Factory," and I'll like carry that around in my wallet for like a year or something. So almost everything you just named existed on a post-it note during like an idea dump somewhere, and I think like, oh, Fackle Wackerton is a funny name, and I don't know where I'm going to use it, but it lived on a Post-it note for a while until I found a place to use it. um, and I think you've identified something where I think one of my favorite things to do is create a ridiculously named business that would probably never exist in the world, or a or something that is so ridiculously named, an organization that is so ridiculously named that they have to abbreviate it, but the abbreviation is more complicated than the actual name, and I think
Yeah.
that is really funny, and I lean into that a lot, as you can see.
But every time the PPPPGGGCLC was in the book, I went over and counted the letters to make sure there wasn't a typo. It was, yeah, it took me twice as long to finish the book. But and that's from Pigeon, which that was the first book of yours
Yeah.
that I read, and you have kept that same style, yeah, or you brought forward that same style from Bender, Bon Prison, and
Hmm.
Bastards of the Republic. I don't know if I'm allowed to use that word or not, but it's contextual, so we'll get away with that. Um, I've read. I was loath to read Bastards of the Revolution. I thought it was going to be the French Revolution, and you told me when we met it was the American. I thought, well, should I, shouldn't I? And I don't know how much. I don't know how much research you put into it, but it's amazing. It's themed, I think, as historical fiction. But
Yeah.
wow, I'd learned a lot, and we spoke before we came on air about the Fourth of July
Yeah.
and that connection. And just hearing you talk about it, you have an immense brain, if I can be so bold as to say that. I was reading
Thanks.
this
Yeah.
one did that and that. It's wow. To me, yeah, I have to do years of research and then I forget half of it. But while we were talking, it's like you've still got. Is that a specialist subject for you, or
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it is a specialist subject for me by accident. Um, this goes back like 20 years, but I think when I was probably like 26, I was a pretty conscientious reader when I was a kid, and somewhere during college, I stopped reading regularly for fun. I think probably just because I'd really gone down the music rabbit hole, and really really spent most of my time with my rock band and like writing music. Like all my creative energy was dumped into that rock band, and we wanted to make it big. And no shade to that experience, that was super fun. We didn't make any money, but I'm so glad we did that. We had such a great time. But there came a time somewhere. Oh, I moved to Indiana because I fell in love with a woman here, and um, I sort of my creative output started to change. I started reading far more, and it was during that era I started reading a lot about sort of the characters of the American founding. And I noticed two things. There's some hypocrisy in the way, not hypocrisy, but modern historians really, a lot of them really revere the American founding fathers, the George Washington, Ben Franklin, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, James Monroe. I mean, these folks are held on pedestals. Um, and that's the first thing I noticed. And then the second thing I sort of noticed about them was uh, that there's I guess maybe it's related to the first thing, but I feel like we're only telling part of their story, and part of their story, like not their entire story, is recorded anyway. But these guys were complicated. I mean, they were still human beings, but we don't see any photographs of them. We only see paintings, which mean we see an artist representation of them. So they're always put together, and they always look handsome, and their hair's nice or whatever. By the time you start seeing photographs of American leaders, they're really gritty, and the people look almost like a little dirty, and you kind of think, oh yeah, like the founders must have looked like that, but we don't have photos of them. So what would their gritty lives look like? And that's where I came up with this idea for Bastards of the Revolution. This is years later. I kind of realized I had all this knowledge because I'd really gone down a reading rabbit hole for years with no intent to write about it. I was just interested. And by the time I got this idea to say, these guys were famous, and that really doesn't come through in a lot of the writing. They were famous. They made morally questionable decisions, and I'm not throwing shade at them for that. They're human beings. All human beings, you know, have inner debates about ethics and morals and all this kind of stuff. And I thought, if they were that famous, I'm not going to pretend that they weren't attractive to females. I mean, there were no movie stars back then. There were no rock stars back then. These guys were truly the most famous people on the American continent, and it was documented that crowds showed up when they all descended on Philadelphia to write our American Constitution. Crowds showed up just to catch a glimpse of them. So I thought, of course, women would have been attracted to them. What if those women treated them the way some people treat modern rock stars and movie stars? Like, they would have had groupies, and some of these guys, it's pretty well proven that some of these guys could not resist that kind of attention. So I thought, all right, I'm going to write the fictional account of what if one of these groupies tried to get to know each one intimately. And so I just let my imagination run wild on it. But I never did any research purposely for that. It was all just an accumulation of reading through the years, reading biographies about each one, just because I was interested.
I wanted to do some Napoleonic stuff, and I read about the French Revolution. So no, I'm not even going to touch it. So yeah, I feel the pain.
No, I was going to say, I've read a little bit about Napoleon and the French Revolution, not as much as I've read about the American War for Independence, but I definitely, I mean, as you know from reading Bastards, like, I talk about Napoleon a little bit. One of my favorite things to do is create a fictitious personality for these guys, sort of as a commentary on, we're really only seeing one side of them as humans anyway. We see the side that historians hand down to us. So I thought it was really fun to play with the actual human personality of somebody like Napoleon, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, those kind of guys. So I'm into the Napoleon thing also. I love reading about that era.
Did you see the film, the one they brought out with that Phoenix chap?
Yeah, with the Phoenix chap. I love it. No, I actually haven't yet. I've heard mixed reviews. I think Oliver liked it. I feel like he did. And that's just been one of those that I've been meaning to watch at some point, but just sort of haven't gotten around to. Did you like it?
I did. It felt like it was Gladiator, but pitched with Napoleon. It puts visuals to words that I'd previously read. Obviously, you've got that Hollywood-esque style to it, and the odd tweak here and there, like they did with Bohemian Rhapsody with the time frames. But it was. I enjoyed the film. I did.
It's the same director as Gladiator, right? I'm pretty sure it's the same director as Gladiator. But yeah, I'm excited to see that movie. I haven't seen it yet, and I don't know. Maybe it's probably the wrong director, but maybe he wants to make Bastards of the Revolution into a movie. That'd be ideal.
I could see that turning into a book, into a film, but the one that I definitely saw more film options for was, I want to say it's an autobiographical book, Bender at Bon Parisien, because as I was reading it, I was picturing you as the main character. Now, I don't know how much of that
No, it
was
essentially
based
is.
on. Oh, there we go. Yeah, and I picked that up after having read Chinatown Troubadour because there were bits in there that I could relate back and so, oh,
So here's the brief rundown that should explain some things for you. So basically, Bender at the Bon Parisian was my first big creative writing project since college, and essentially I was spending all this energy making music, and then all of a sudden we had kids, and I couldn't be making noise in the house at all hours, and I couldn't, sort of disappear into my basement studio and just go go go. So so I devoted myself to writing that, and the prompt I gave myself was Molly, my wife. We were in Paris together, staying in a hotel, and the bar was closed. Just like the opening chapter of Bender at the Bon Parisian, I asked the concierge if, well, since the bar was closed, I just said, "Hey, I've been a bartender. Can I go in there? And can I just do it? You can come with me. I'll make you a drink. Let's go." And he was very friendly and laughed and said, "No, thanks. Have a good night." And so when I was writing that book, or when I was launching that creative project, I asked myself, what would have happened if he said yes? And I just let my imagination run wild on what could have happened if he said yes. So essentially, both Peter and Janie, the main characters in Bender at the Bon Parisian, are representations of my wife and me if we'd been thrust inside this circumstance. Now, granted, my wife and I are much less risk takers than Peter and Janie wind up being to like put themselves in this situation. But that was sort of the roadmap. After I finished that, I already had the idea for Pigeon, and I felt like by the time I got to the end of Bender, I sort of had settled on a creative voice. And while I can look back at Bender and see myself sort of developing it, I had a much clearer, like more rich picture of how I wanted Pigeon to sound, and I felt like I was kind of like figuring some stuff out writing Bender. I'd never written a novel before, and now I'd learned some lessons, and I was ready to try something new with Pigeon. And somewhere along the line with Bender, I'd gotten this idea to, like, wouldn't it be fun to write about a club, like a secret country club or a secret society that their entire basis of being was around a sport that was so elite nobody else in the world had ever heard of it, but they lived and died by the sport. And that's kind of how Pigeon came along. The other thing that hopefully is interesting about Pigeon is I'd gotten feedback about Bender. Like, I went to one book club that that read it, and they said, there was all these really rich side characters in Bender. They said, but Peter and Janie, the main characters, they said, we actually don't feel like we really knew them that well. Didn't know anything about their past, nothing about how they met, nothing about their families. But we learned all this backstory about the side characters. And they said, in the end, we didn't really wind up caring about Peter and Janie as much as we wound up caring about the side characters. So with Pigeon, I thought, okay, how do I really create a main character that you learn about, and that you really like understand his motivations, and you know where he came from and why he is who he is. And so that was my project with Pigeon. And halfway through that book, I got the idea for Bastards. And so I was trying to apply all these lessons I was learning along the way. And by the time I got to Bastards, I had a really good idea for how my voice was coming through and how I was going to pace it and how I would try and weave an intricate story, but still tell it as simply as possible. I think is one of the main tricks for a writer, especially one who wants to be read, is like, how do you create something creative but it's still digestible? You still have to like use language people understand, and the pace has to feel right, and they can't feel like you're just beating them over the head with a story. So that's been my progression, and I'm proud of it. And I felt like I was starting over a little bit with Chinatown because it was nonfiction, and all of a sudden I'm the main character, really truly me, and I'm not hiding behind a fictional character or anything. But I mean, I'm happy for that as my first one, and I think I've found so much joy in writing this last decade and a half or so. I just feel happy to be back and expressing myself that way.
And yeah, your voice is there constantly, even with Chinatown. Whilst it is non-fiction, you can tell it's you telling the story. And
It's
again,
great to
sound
hear.
like a fanboy. That's what I like. I did enjoy that. It's like, oh, this is Pres talking about what's happened. Um, and I don't know if it's all connected, but each of the four books that I've read, it's almost been like a where is it kind of. They've all been looking for something, which I don't know if that's
Hmm.
purposely done, but keep doing it because honestly, it works very, very well for you.
Oh, good. No, thank you. I don't know if I'm a good enough writer to write an entire book where someone's not looking for something. I haven't figured out how to do that yet. So I'm glad it's working. Thank you for that feedback.
Yeah, I mean, Nev, she reads loads of books and she does all these horror books or these crime thrillers, and she finds the person and they write in the same style. So you've cracked it already. So yeah, I'd love Netflix to pick
Good.
one,
Nice.
two,
Good to
three, or
hear.
even all of these books. And I've not read your play. I'm not great with reading plays, but I will get round to the play.
No, thank you. Thank you for even bringing it up. The play is sort of a different animal because people read differently than they listen. Information is digested through the ears differently than it is through the eyes. And as a professional copywriter, I mean, that's my day job, is writing ads and stuff. That's a really that's a really important thing to remember, that when you hear someone selling an idea, they're on a stage, they're giving a talk, they're pitching it, they're dynamic, they have some visual aids. You can't just take exactly what they say. 9 times out of 10, you can't take exactly what they say and write it down and have it hit the same. So with the play, I agree with you. I'm not great at reading plays, but during the pandemic, I had this idea. Okay, what if I shift my brain and I'm not writing for someone to read it anymore as much as I'm writing for people to be performing it live? And so I wrote the play. That's a whole different topic, but I'd wanted to write a play for 2 decades and it never really clicked. But during the pandemic, I got an idea for it. And I luckily have these wonderful actor friends who were willing to let me listen to them perform it live a few times privately, just so I could kind of get an idea for pacing and how they were bringing characters to life. So last December, we actually put it on stage as sort of a hybrid live reading, live performance. It's not a live reading where they were just sitting on stools and reading it for an audience. They were doing the blocking. They were moving around the stage. They were being the characters, but they were carrying scripts with them. I didn't make them memorize an hour worth of stuff, but they brought it to life. We sold out the show in this little theater in Indianapolis, 65, 70 people or something. And it was so fun seeing them do that. And it was a crazy rewarding night. I still have hopes and dreams that play will come to life. But if it never does, that night was enough to fill my soul as a playwright. That was so fun to see. But it's definitely a different animal than writing a novel, than storytelling. It's a totally different type of storytelling.
Okay, changing direction because we're now going to start talking about your socials and
Mhm.
stuff. Firstly, I'm
Yeah.
wearing a red cap, not a political statement, and I wore that
It's
because I
tricky
did read
in
your
America.
Substack. Yeah, I read your Substack where you've mentioned it. And talking about Substack, um, again, you're using it beautifully, and how I imagine Substack to be used.
Oh,
It
thank you.
started to turn into Threads and Twitter or X, where people are just putting random thoughts down, and I don't like that. Whereas yours are articles. You're vocalizing, and it's great. You covered one about, I think it was the children of the Beatles. They got together and had a moment, and it's obviously it's you talking, but it's nice where I get to read things as opposed to, oh well, Dave from Colorado thinks, oh, it's cold outside, why do we wear scarves?
Right.
That's not interesting. It's but what you do.
Yeah.
So how do we find you firstly on Substack?
Yep. So you can find me. I think the URL is presmaxson.substack.com, or you could just search, Pres Maxson at Substack. The link is also in my Instagram bio. Instagram's at Pres Maxson, PresMaxson. There's a couple ways to find it, and I'm real proud of the Substack work. And it's sort of a joy to write and then to engage with people after they've read it. And I don't have a huge audience there, but I have enough of one to help me find my nonfiction voice. And I'm not a journalist, but I do sort of like look for some interesting thing out in the world, and then I just write about it. And so in the case of the Beatles children getting together and writing, I'm a big Beatles fan, and I just thought that was interesting. So I find that I write about music on Substack more frequently than not. I love baseball, American baseball, and so not lately, I guess, but when I started, I wrote about baseball like pretty often. And so it's a nice representation of the things I love, and I think that's how you write nonfiction. Is you start by just writing about stuff you know and stuff you love, and look for something interesting, or ask yourself an interesting question about that thing you love, and then go off and try and find the answer. So I'm very proud of that work. Thank you so much for reading it. But yes, please, anyone listening to this, please find me on Substack or on Instagram, and I would love to meet you that way.
And I did mention it again when we spoke the first time. Your Instagram page, the feed, the walls with all the pictures. Honestly, it's mind blowing. So definitely for those listening, check it out. It's how do you choose which photos to do that with?
I mean, I'm not a photographer, but I just try and choose ones that are most, that are sort of most beautiful and most interesting to me. I do have one rule for myself. I try and take a picture that's a picture of a moment and not of just a thing. I mean, I think a prime example would be, I don't take a picture of a house because the house is sort of always there and anyone could walk by and take that picture. But if you see a bird sitting on the house, or if you see somebody sitting out on the front step, it's like, well, someone walking by in 10 minutes won't see that bird or that person. They might have moved on, or someone walking by tomorrow won't see that house in this state. So I think that's sort of my rule for photography. And like I said, I'm not a photographer, but that's what I go for, is I try and find a moment that isn't going to be there forever, and take that picture. So I'm my professional life as a creative director, I realized a while back, like, hey, my Instagram feed should probably reflect, the level of creativity that I'm trying to bring to my professional life and my hobbies. So that's how I sort of started converting there, and I cannot thank you enough for noticing. That means a lot, and it's definitely a source of pride for me.
And if you flick on the other tab on the Instagram page, you get the reels, which you're I called it the Brady Bunch, which but you've got your Brady Bunch music, which that really showcases how good a musician you are.
Yeah, I'm proud of that. I didn't invent that or anything, but a few years ago I discovered an app that let me do that rather easily. So basically, when we say Brady Bunch, it's a bunch of boxes on the screen, and I'm in each one playing a different instrument, sort of along with the other boxes, along with myself. And those are a great source of fun as well. So thank you for finding those.
It's like a digital 4-track, or a digital visual 4-track or 8-track. It's where you're watching it, and obviously I'm talking about the recorders rather than the old-fashioned cassettes. But it's nice watching that, and the fact it's you. Where you're with Beatles, I'm with Buddy Holly, and I know some of his tracks he overdubbed with himself singing, and it's that sort of feeling that it's musical genius. You may not have invented it, but you've mastered it, and I'm going to say playing with yourself must feel magical, but playing with yourself must feel magical.
It's a tricky way to phrase it like that, but I cannot disagree.
Right, I have I've only got 3 questions left, which aren't particularly exciting. 4 questions, right? They're not particularly exciting, but
Okay.
I've been asked by my eldest, Rory. I know you sort of answered it, but what's your favourite style of French music?
Favorite style of French music? Yeah. Um, well, I think the best way to describe it, maybe for people who aren't familiar, and I'm not sure how to describe it. I mean, they would have called it pop or maybe vocal pop, but I'm like thinking back to, an era in the 50s and 60s when people like Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin were famous. I don't know what we call that now. I mean, like kind of like swinging Rat Pack music, or I mean, it's not what we think of as pop now. It was pop then for sure. Um, I've heard it described as vocal pop. I've heard it kind of described as like crooner music, but the French version of that is Charles Trenet and Charles Aznavour, and those two are my favorites. I was first sort of Charles Trenet was my gateway artist into that era, and after I discovered Trenet, I like Aznavour. His personality comes through in these songs in a way that's totally different from Trenet, and absolutely fell in love with Aznavour's music. Of course, Edith Piaf is similar genre, but totally different, and like really an endearing figure in her voice as well. So I don't know how to describe that style, but that's the era, and those are the artists that I've really been drawn to the most through the years. So I don't know if you call that like 60s French pop. I mean, it definitely the style started in the 30s and 40s, and kind of I wouldn't say it ended in the 60s, but I tend to gravitate away towards artists like the more recent you get. Although been some really fine French pop in the last few years that I've loved to listen to, but that's my sweet spot. French pop from the 40s, 50s, 60s.
I was watching the channel W9, which is a French station. I was watching that online, and I learned Vanessa Paradis has released another song, which
Yeah,
it took me by surprise. I saw her dancing on the video, so oh, is she that old? But she still had the fluidity, and it was a nice song. I forgot what it was called.
she's wonderful. Yeah, she is wonderful, and we redid one of her songs, or we recorded one of her songs as part of a medley for the Earful album about the 20 arrondissements. I'm trying to remember. Oh, it's on the tip of my tongue. It's in my head. It's one of her big hits. Anyway, I'm a fan of hers, and she's one of those more recent pop artists.
Yeah, the only one I know is Joe Taxi because we're over in England, and that's the only one that she ever did, as far as we're concerned. Forget the fact she's
Oh,
got eight
funny,
albums. We only know Joe Taxi.
funny.
Um,
Yeah, that's funny. That's not the one I'm thinking of, obviously, but she's wonderful. A great example of a more recent French pop artist that I'm a fan of.
we, for me, because of my connection with Buddy Holly, they're totally not the same. But Johnny Halliday as well. I run and often put him
Yeah,
in my ear as well as Dua Lipa. But it's yeah, he was something else, something totally different.
Johnny was. I think I said it in Chinatown. Johnny was the first CD other than Lucky's cassette tape. Was the first CD of like French music that I bought like way back then. And my aunt and uncle really made fun of me for that. they I mean, like, nothing against Johnny. I loved that CD. I still love it. I know exactly where it is upstairs, even though I don't have a CD player anymore. It's still just, a souvenir. So I can relate to the love for Johnny, especially I see the tie to Buddy Holly that you're talking about. I think there's a tie to Elvis there also through Johnny,
Yeah.
which is kind of charming. So yeah, I'm on board with Johnny Holiday. We remade one of his songs also for that album on Earful.
Sticking with music, it's quoted many, many
Yep.
times that you never come across a piano that you didn't want to play. So, what's your sort of go-to piece, or would you just sit down and ad lib?
Yeah, I would just sit down and play. I don't have like any one song that's my go-to. But no, that is something I say pretty often that I've never met a piano I didn't want to play. And there's a double-edged sword there because some pianos I should not just sit down and just play. If it's a busy hotel lobby and the employees are slammed with trying to check people and whatever, you shouldn't sit down and make and add to the noise. you know um but especially like it's trendy to have street pianos out there in the world these days, and it's real tough for me to walk by one if it's empty and not sit and play on it. Yeah, that's one of my favorite things to do.
At the arrivals doors at St Pancras, where the Eurostar comes in, there's a piano right outside that. If you're ever that way.
I love it. No, airport pianos, like also in America, are similar. There's one in Newark, New Jersey. That's how I fly in and out of New York, and I find myself in New York more frequently now than almost any other American city that's not my home. And I stop to play it almost every time.
Right, two more questions, and then it's over to you. First question is when you go to a coffee shop, what do you order?
I only recently started drinking caffeine again, so I am pretty much just a black coffee guy. If it's and I only really have one cup every morning, and then I switch to decaf and maybe have another, but then it's off. If it's a special occasion, I'll get a flat white. I like flat whites, but that's really about it. I'm not like a lover or a connoisseur of coffee. I do not mind cheap coffee, but that's it. Usually just like regular coffee, black. But yeah, it's got to be, if the mood strikes me right, a flat white, it like hits a spot.
And final question. Sometimes you get those little biscuits.
hmm
We have Lotus biscuits, but in Paris they're speculoos. What do you do with your one?
I actually usually don't get
Oh,
like a biscuit. I think because I'm American, I'm a donut guy. Like if I'm getting something with coffee, it's probably a donut. Uh, but that's not an every time thing.
have you had Tim Hortons, if I'm allowed to swear?
I love Tim Hortons. Yeah, yeah. I have a whole I have a whole case of Tim Hortons like instant pods upstairs. We don't have a lot in my area of the country. A lot of Tim Hortons. That's a Canada thing, and so like some of the northern states along the border, and like Massachusetts, Boston, I think has some Tim Hortons. Dunkin' Donuts is a Boston thing, and I think that they sort of compete. But I am a big Tim Hortons fan. Yeah.
Brilliant. Right, that's me finished. So over to you. I want you to tell us how we can find you, so obviously your socials and also your books. Where can we buy your
Yep.
books from?
Yeah, absolutely. So my Instagram handle is at Pres Maxson, PresMaxson. You can find me there. You can find me on Substack. You can get my books on Amazon. Amazon prints them, and that's my main method of sales. But of course, if you see me in person, that's another way to do it. You can follow me on Amazon, which is kind of an avenue for authors that's really helpful. So those are the main three, and I would love to. I mean, you comment on something or you reach out to me on any of those, I will 100% answer. So hope to hear from any and everybody.
All right, last question. It's for my youngest, Jasper. Is Press your real name, your full name, a contraction of a name? He didn't say contraction, that was me. And you don't have to answer it.
No, no, I'll gladly answer it. It is my real name. It is what I have gone by since before I could make the decision. My parents made the decision. It is my middle name, and it's short for Prescott. My first name is the same as my dad's, so they had just called me Press from the very beginning, and yeah, that wasn't like a style choice that I made on my own. but I'm very grateful that they made that for me, because I feel like Pres Maxson has served me well. It's a memorable name. I've never met another Pres Maxson the way that I think probably someone named John Smith has probably heard of, 1,000 other John Smiths in the world. I've never met another Pres Maxson, and I'm sort of proud of that. So yeah, it's short for Prescott, and I'm happy with it. I'm happy with it.
It's a creative sounding name, and it suits you, and that's exactly what you need.
Yeah, no, I think it is. So thank you to your youngest. You said Jasper. Thank you to Jasper for asking
Absolutely.
that. Is that his name?
Yeah, it certainly is. Yeah.
Cool.
And yeah, Rory's the one that sings the main jingle for the podcast.
Coffee Pot Conversations.
He's actually started learning the piano, incidentally.
Oh, wonderful. Well, best of luck on that. That will bring a lot of joy.
Thank you. But no, that's it. So thank you for reaching out and asking me to have you as a guest. We did speak about it during chapter 5 when I was very new at the whole podcast scene. So you still coming back and wanting more. Honestly, it's been an absolute honor for me.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and it's always a treat to talk about books and music and making artwork. So appreciate it. Thanks for having me, man.
No problem. Next time, we will talk more about Paris.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much.
Coffee Pot Conversations.
So, thanks for listening to my podcast and joining me on this episode. Follow me, flick through my channels and socials, find all my other episodes, writings and photos. Don't forget to like, subscribe, join my blog and follow me on Instagram. That's it. Now it's time for Jasper's jingle.
Coming up on Coffee Pot Conversations.
We have season 4 to come. Well, that depends on when you're listening. Season 4 may be out. So why not go and give yourself a quick listen or a watch of Coffee Pot Conversations. It's available on Spotify and YouTube, audio and video, although you pretty much know where it is because you're listening already or watching it already. It's also available on Patreon for free, and that's this podcast as well as my blog and any recorded episodes of my blogcast. If you wish to reach out regarding this or any future interview, send an email to interview@anenglishmaninparis.blog. Until next time, keep the coffee hot, the pot warm, and the conversation cool.
Coffee Pot Conversations.